Empowered Together would like to advise that the following content includes discussion of sexual assault and abuse. If you're affected by the content of this video, please stop watching and contact the most appropriate service for you that are listed below.
We would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional owners of the land on which this interview was filmed. We pay our respects to elders past, present and future of the Kulin Nation, and we extend that respect to any Indigenous people viewing this video.
Hi everyone, my name's Steph and I'm the Marketing Project Coordinator here at Empowered Together, and I've been volunteering for about 3 years.
And I'm Courtney, I'm the Content Manager, and I've been volunteering with Empowered Together for just over a year.
April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, so last week we met with Chanel Contos to talk about her awesome accomplishments so far and chat about all things consent.
Chanel Contos has been making headlines with her launch of the Teach Us Consent petition, demanding quality sex education in schools. The 22-year-old Sydney activist was exhausted hearing of her friends' experiences of sexual assault and harassment, so she decided to do something about it. Chanel believes that more often than not, sexual assault and misconduct derives from a lack of education on consent, and she's not alone. Since the petition launched on International Women's Day, it's already received over 40,000 signatures. Chanel's website also accepts testimonials from survivors who are sharing their stories of sexual assault and trauma to showcase how urgent this issue is. Let's take a look.
Taking the time to chat with us today. We're really big fans of you and your work and everything you've achieved so far, and we're really excited to chat to you. So I guess firstly, we just wanted to commend you on all the work you've done in bringing attention to this issue. We just wanted to know a bit more about how you got the movement started.
So it's kind of funny because last year I very actively wanted to start a movement, and that's when I collected my first few testimonies. But I was kind of going to do it behind the scenes. I didn't really think about turning it to social media. I just thought I could get enough testimonies on my own with my friends and our own experiences, because pretty much everyone I know has one. And then I got sidetracked. I ended up moving to London and kind of put the project aside, but still had a collection of the testimonies that my friends had given me. And then it happened super spontaneously in London. I was just with my friend who was sexually assaulted when we were younger, and they're one of my best friends in the whole world, and we were just sitting there crying about our sexual assault experiences, and I think I was probably more crying about how much it impacted them rather than my own, because I feel like I processed mine lots, but I still get really clammy and sweaty and shaky when I talk about sexual assault and stuff. And we were just sitting there being this is just so ridiculous that it's however many years on, 8, 9, whatever years on, and we're still feeling this trauma, and they probably aren't even aware they did this to us. And it's actually really funny as well, because initially, and thank God I got told not to, my rational flatmate at the time was not such a good idea. We were just gonna tag the boys who sexually assaulted my friend, and it was just gonna be a massive, just a single call out. And then we were no, let's make it anonymous, they'll know who they are. And then from there we just thank God we didn't tag anyone, and it just went viral from Instagram pretty much.
Amazing. Yeah, that's so incredible. How does it feel to know that, your petition is almost at 40,000 signatures and 4,000 testimonies around about?
Yeah,
I
haven't posted the rest of them, but there's actually 6,200 testimonies now.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I did a final count the other day and I was just oh my God.
Yeah, it's amazing that this response just in such a short amount of time. Yeah, how does it make you feel that people have jumped on that so quickly?
I'm so happy that people shared their stories, and I think the anonymous part of that is what made it possible. Unfortunately, because of the reality of our society, it's so hard to identify yourself as a victim of sexual assault, survivor of sexual assault. But it doesn't surprise me. Those numbers don't surprise me at all. I know they're low. I know there's more. I know there's. It's actually so funny. all my closest friends didn't submit testimonies because they just know I do it. And like it's just, even like the original friend who started the whole petition, we were talking the other day and they were just like, yeah, I haven't submitted mine yet. And I was just like, the amount of people who haven't, the amount of people who are still processing, the amount of people who still didn't realize that there had been like are still kind of off the back of this have probably realized they've been sexually assaulted once learning what the ins and outs of it are, who still haven't had the time to reflect enough and tell that story, or just the sheer amount of people who haven't seen it. I mean, it's massive in New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland, and there's definitely tractions from all other states and territories, but it's not like there's not like thousands of entries the same way it is with New South Wales and Victoria.
I'm sure some of those stories must have been really hard to hear and really take a toll on your mental health, and especially in the context of what's happening in our own parliament. Like, a lot of people feel disheartened, like, the government's just sweeping these incidences of sexual violence under the rug. What do you do to sort of maintain a positive attitude and when there's all these frustrations, and what's your sort of biggest motivator to keep pushing?
My biggest motivator to keep pushing is like every single time someone tells me that they've decided to report, or that their friends now believe them, or that their family now believes them, or that they've been able to process this themselves, or that they've told someone for the first time, or that they've messaged their perpetrator to tell them it's not okay, or that I get a message from someone to say, I'm reflecting on the way that my friend group used to do things and that was really messed up, and that's like usually boys. So that's definitely my motivation. And yeah, in terms of mental health, I mean, like, yeah, to be honest, it's been horrible. Like I've never really I guess I've experienced like moderate anxiety before, but like I definitely get like panic attacks or anxiety attacks like every other day now. And my school was like, what can we do to help you and support you? Like my old school, which is like quite a like a privilege, like it basically it's super expensive to go there and they have a lot of money. And they were like, what can we do to help you? And I was like, I need a personal assistant and I need therapy.
Yeah.
So that's what, so I started like going to therapy to kind of like deal with the like vicarious trauma, because it is like a lot to on board, and it's really hard when it's through Instagram as well, because you can see the person, like you can see their lives, you can see their friends, and it's so hard to not look at them. But it's definitely worth it overall, for sure.
Absolutely. I can't imagine. I mean, I was having to flip through some of the testimonies on your page, and it is really hard to read. It's pretty triggering, like for someone, as a woman, experienced that stuff myself and heard so many stories from my friends, and it's really hard to read all that and relive all those experiences again as well. I'm glad to know that your school's been in contact with you and they're reaching out and taking care of you as well. It's good to hear.
Yeah, definitely lapping up the resources.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very because they didn't have to do that.
Yeah. I don't know how much you know about what we do. So at Empower Together, we're a peer-led, volunteer-run organisation. We run, workshops in schools, trying to teach kids about consent and sexual assault prevention. And it started off because our two founders, they studied law, and as they were going through their degree, learning about consent laws and all that stuff, they realised that was the first time they'd actually ever learnt any of that stuff, when they're in their early 20s. And so they thought it was a really fundamental thing that should have been taught in early high school, if not younger. So why do you think there is such a strong opposition to this stuff being introduced to young people?
I think there's a few things. I think first of all, like a conservative view, and to be honest, like in terms of what studies show and academics show, incorrect view. People think that talking to youth about sex from a young age will encourage them to have sex from a younger age, where actually, like, I'm doing my dissertation on this, and all research points to having an open communication, like an open environment with like strong communication and not taboo subjects, actually leads to higher average teen first sexual experience, right? So like they do it when they're older, and like lower rates of sexual encounters overall in teens. But I think that's like the biggest pushback. I think the other thing is people don't see it as a priority to teach consent because they think of a rapist as a stereotypical rapist, and they think our children, my child, my students, the average child, the average teenager is not sadistic. They're not going to rape someone. They don't need to be taught what rape is. It's, I guess it's the same way we don't teach murder in our schools, because it's just like no one just like, we just don't do it, so it's okay. But I think what people don't realize is that because our society, like through the way that our attitudes towards gender and sexuality have just normalized all these microaggressions around rape, that has just led to this environment where it is so easy to sexually assault someone and not even be able to identify that you've done that yourself. For example, when me and my friend were initially crying, the question was, do they even know they've done this to us? My personal answer is like, well, they definitely know now, but like they didn't know then. And like that's the exact problem. And even if they did know then, even if they did learn when consent was and had this moment of being like, oh, not so good, they probably did not dwell on it the same way we did. Like they probably just think like, oh, that was something embarrassing I did when I was drunk or when I was young. They don't think of it as a criminal offense. So I think that we need to like change the perception of what a rapist is in our society, because that kind of sadistic type of rapist is so rare, whereas a young person who is putting their sexual desires before the person in front of them, so common. And I think that's why there's pushback. I think it's not seen as a necessity because it's not seen as it's not seen as something that is in our society at all. I mean, what this movement has shown so much is, so many people are like, oh my God, I had no idea sexual assault was this common. And all the girls have been like, we did. Like, what's not common is reporting it. What's not common is speaking up.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that's, what all your testimonies show and have really shown to the media and the government and all, and people, as you described, it's really shown that, this does affect pretty much everyone, in some way.
But even my poll last night, I know like sexual harassment is the like foundations of sexual abuse, and that like crazy stat which everyone thought was crazy, but I honestly thought was like a conservative estimate and low. Like 97% of women in the UK have been sexually harassed in the streets, and that was 18 and above only. And if you also take from my Instagram last night the amount of schoolgirls, the fact that schoolgirls receive more sexual harassment than older people, it would actually be higher. And actually that doesn't make sense because they grow up anyway, whatever. I was honestly like, wow, 3% of women haven't been sexually harassed. Amazing, good for them. But my poll last night, it has like 2,000 responses or something, and again, it's 96% of people who responded said they've been sexually harassed. So like, people don't realize that the small things they do lead to the big things, and schools don't realize that they need to teach people not to do the small things.
Have you found dealing with sort of different institutions like schools and governments? I know you're kind of, you're even working with police and that kind of thing. Have you kind of found it? Has anything surprised you in like a good or bad way, I guess?
I'm surprised with how welcoming most institutions have been. I've definitely had some pushback on the religious front, which again just baffles me because it's like I know that their school ethos is abstinence, whether they actively teach it or whether they just refuse to teach other things, because that is what the thing implies. But sexual assault is not a choice and abstinence is a choice. So I'm still really, really, really confused why religion
That's such a good point.
Like as in, if anything, teaching people about consent and sexual assault will, as I said before, increase the rates, like increase the age that teens have sex, and also probably empower someone who wants to stay abstinent to, respect their boundaries if that is what they want, if other people are going to respect their boundaries. But, and also it's interesting, Mariah, which is a really religious school in Sydney, well, I say really religious in the sense that like it's a Jewish school and it's got a very strong culture. But when I say really religious, I mean, it was just so ironic to me that like, there's a rabbi who heads that school, and he has devoted his whole life to practicing his religion. And, I contrast that to a lot of these heads of schools at like Anglican schools who potentially go to church once a month, maybe, and I'm sure probably do not abide by religious ethos in all other aspects of their life. And these are the people, telling me like, absolutely no, we cannot teach our kids these things. Yet I have a rabbi who, has more religious, like, analytical thinking and like, than any of them. And he's obviously like, this is a human rights issue and we need to keep our kids safe. So obviously we're going to teach this in our school. And they've just like instantly implemented long-term consistent programs about consent that start from an early age in high school and have created an open conversation, and let the head boy and head girl give a speech about it that was very like to the point, and like no euphemisms to talk about it, just we talk about this thing and it's just like, it's just the perfect example of how religious ethos is not applicable to the situation, because as I said, consent's not sexual assault's not a choice, so there's no yeah.
That's fantastic to hear. I wouldn't expect like such a strongly religious school to get into it so much. It's awesome to hear, and I hope that paving the way for other schools to jump in and do the same thing. On that note, now in Victoria, consent education is mandatory. Well, in the works of becoming mandatory. We'll see what that means, but
I can tell you guys what that means because I met with
oh yeah.
So what that means is, so they had the respectful relations program and the materials, and consent was in there, but it was not a compulsory part of being taught. It was just there as a resource if teachers wanted to address it or not. So now they have to address it, and that's starting like term 2. So that started like last week. They have to. Is it last week? Sorry, I don't know what week we're in. They have to address that module in the respectful relations, but they're also aware that that module is not comprehensive enough on consent. So in the background and for more long term, we've been having a bit of back and forth, and they've been like planning these like quite comprehensive consent materials that address like healthy masculinities, abusive relationships, queer sex ed, like in terms of different types of sexualities, which is amazing. I question how explicitly that will be addressed. But I think especially as teachers who come through are like more our age, like we have a new generation of teachers coming through, and they will see like the word non-traditional sexualities or whatever they want to call it and be like, okay, like we're going to talk about this, and like, which I think is good. And we're doing some like back and forth. I emphasize to them that they need to massively include the word victim blaming in like all forms of abusive relationships. And there's like a few other things, but it actually seems like really great. And that's going to be rolled out more long term, and I'm kind of very happy for them to take their time to make sure they get it right, because it's so rare that governments do update curriculums and things like that. But yeah, at least in the meantime, schools need to point to the word consent and that respectful relations curriculum and like make sure people know what it is.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we see like just a couple of days ago that crazy milkshake video. I just thought, I was watching it today with my friend just to show her again, and I was like cringing the whole time. But she was saying surely they would have consultants about what's going on here, like they've got to have people that are in tune with youth and issues that are going on. Like they've got this girl as the perpetrator, and it's like, what's going on here? Like it's just crazy.
It was a boy perpetrator, the boys that have got so angry.
Exactly. Can't have that.
It's just the epitome of the problem, isn't it? But I agree. I think again it's the disconnect. I think that they don't realize how common abusive relationships are and sexual assault is. I think that they think it's anyway,
like ticking a box almost. It seems like it's a real thing. Like
it's a strange box to tick with how much effort went into it, but
Anyway, you've told us all this incredible stuff that you've been doing. So what's next for you, and what's your future looking like?
So my next kind of like big aims are to get legislation change around Australia, and I'm starting this in Victoria and New South Wales because I have access to the attorney generals in those states, and I basically want there to be a lower sentence for a lower criminal conviction for this type of rapist who is not sadistic in nature. You know, this entitled opportunist type of rapist. I'm not sure if you guys follow my Instagram or have seen the posts about this. Yeah, so like an entitled opportunist is the kind of like everyday rapist, the nice person, the person who doesn't do it to purposely inflict harm. They just do it because they care about their own sexual desires more in that instance and don't have empathy for the person in front of them. And I think another problem is no one reports because these entitled opportunists don't get through our criminal system because they don't need to go to jail. Like the question is, does this person need to go to jail and rehabilitate? And my answer is in most cases, no. They just, you know, like a 14-year-old boy doesn't need to be sent to jail for 7 to 14 years. He needs to be taught empathy. He needs to be taught healthy masculinity. He needs to be taught like the same way you would get like community service hours. You need to be like put in like workshops to rehabilitate, but like it doesn't need to be a jail facility. And I also think if that was an option, a lot of victims would be way more willing to report, because it is so hard to think like, do I want to take my ex-boyfriend to jail? Like try to take him to jail? Like the social stigma around it, the fact that you actually don't think that that is what you want, because that's actually not necessarily what's needed. I think there needs to be a lower sentence that holds these people accountable for their actions, makes it easy for someone to report them. And, you know, yeah, and becomes like a very normal thing in our society to like someone for them to be charged with an entitled opportunist, because, you know, we have rapists in our society anyway, we interact with them every day anyway. They need to be held accountable for their actions. I mean, I guess I don't really know that much about drug law in Australia, but as you know, there's a very big difference between a full-on drug dealer who has like, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pills, and then a kid who gets caught at a festival and then gets a section 10 or whatever they're called. Like there needs to be, and I'm not saying that it's like not okay, that it's like not a bad thing and that it doesn't matter and it's thing, but it's just like right now no one's getting convicted, no one's being reported, but if there was this option then they would be. So that's what I want mainly. And I want educational reform, which Victoria is on top of, and I'm focusing my efforts on Victoria a lot right now, because I think that if we get a good program in Victoria going, it would be a lot easier to go to the other states and territories and they can work off that precedent instead of kind of address them all at the same time. I also want the word consent to be in the Australian curriculum, because it is currently not, which would make it mandatory for schools to address. And I want there to be in Victoria, which I would be very surprised if this didn't happen by the end of the year, an informal reporting system where the victim can remain anonymous, so that they can share their story with police. Repeat perpetrators will be picked up on. It will reduce victim blaming, it will normalize reporting sexual assault. And I think if we have that, and then at the same time, if we ever, it's again like, you know, a massive goal, but if we ever do get that legislation in that has that lower level or like a different criminal conviction for a rapist, it's just such an easy stepping stone to go from that to that, which I think is really important. And I'm also starting up a non-for-profit that will address structural barriers to inequality in Australia.
Awesome. So much
Fantastic.
much going on, and you're just
yeah.
Be busy.
Yeah, very busy. And people can obviously keep in touch with you and everything that you're achieving through your Instagram and your website. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. It's been really amazing speaking with you. You're just, so passionate about the topic, which is amazing. And you've done such good work for the issue. So yeah, we're really thankful.
Thank you so much for what you do and your organization does, what Empowered Together does. I think it's it's exactly what I think needs to happen. So I think it's so important.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.